Good afternoon, colleagues. Before I even go into the preliminaries today, colleagues may or may not be aware that there has been a terrorist attack in Manchester this morning at a synagogue. At least 2 people have been killed, 3 have been seriously injured, and stating a fact, the news is saying that the perpetrator has been shot dead by the police. I've used the word terrorist attack deliberately because that is the term that is being used on the BBC News. So, at a time where I think it is vital that as a society we fight terrorism in all forms and extremism in all forms, I'd just like us to take a few seconds silence, please, in remembrance of the victims. Thank you. So on that very sombre note, a big welcome to everybody to this meeting of Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 2nd of October. Usual housekeeping, which I won't dwell on. If you could please make sure that phones are on silent. A fire alarm is not expected. The meeting is being recorded. If anybody wishes to ask a question, raise your hand, yada yada. We're all very used to this drill by now. So moving on to the agenda, item 1, public speaking. Lucy, I don't think we have any.
No, Chairman, we have no public speakers.
Thank you very much. And so item 2, apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from Councillor Anna Kelly, who's been substituted by Councillor Tim Harrison, and we've had apologies from Councillor Susan Sandal.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm not going to dwell on this. Are there any disclosures of interest, please? And the usual line that they can be made at any point in the meeting. So, moving on then, thank you. Item 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of June. Seems an eternity ago. Have members got any comments in respect of the accuracy of the minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on the apprenticeships, which is on, thank you, Lucy, page 13 of the minutes and page 15 of the agenda. There's a mention of 4 apprenticeships in the second paragraph, but it only specifies where 3 of them are placed. So I just wanted to check whether that is a mistake or whether there's one that's not been mentioned, please.
Check that for you.
Anything else, colleagues, on the accuracy of the minutes? Okay, so on that basis, could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Are there any against? And any abstentions? Okay, so 3 abstentions. Thank you. Item 5, announcements or updates from important people. Do we have any? No? Thank you, Councillor Baker. That's fine. So, moving on then, item 6. Councillor Knowles, your corporate enforcement policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, this is the corporate enforcement policy, and it's a new policy refreshed, just last refreshed in 2017 in February. So it's, as you can see, it's overdue for some revision or consideration. I've got my thanks to give to Aisha and her team in particular for producing this over a long period, and also thanks to our legal colleagues in Lincolnshire, represented here by Mr Goldsborough, whom we thank and welcome, who has assisted and checked our operation, our workings on this as it has come to fruition. It is a wide-ranging policy, and it covers several different departments. It does public protection, it does environmental health, environmental protection, private sector housing, community safety, development management, building control, finance and tenancy services. So there has been wide range of consultation amongst those departments who've all had an input into the policy, so that they have looked at it and agreed with its basic tenets before it has been presented to you. This has been presented to 3 different committees, rural, housing and somebody else in a bit. Environment, is it? Yes. They will all go to those committees seeking your assessment and your amendment, should they be necessary, before it goes to Cabinet later in the year. So I'll pass it back to you now, Chair, and look for your comments and your assessment and your comments. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Knowles. So, as the Councillor has just said, the committee can suggest amendments to this policy, but ultimately we have to decide whether we want to ratify it or not. So, I open the floor to any comments. Councillor Harrison.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few questions really on this one. On the overcrowding, which standard will the Council primarily apply? Will it be the Housing Act 1985 or the HHRS? And how will we stop the confusion with landlords and tenants? There's another one on the vulnerable tenants. What safeguards will ensure that the enforcement action does not put vulnerable tenants at greater risk, especially where landlords may evict following penalties? And then there's also one about when we're enforcing against our own tenants, how will we balance that enforcement with the tenancy support that we're obliged to give for our thing? So if somebody could just feed me back on that, I'd be grateful.
Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chair. So the first part was about overcrowding and what part of the legislation, if it's the Housing Act 85 or HHSRS, that was that part, wasn't it? The HHSRS is the way we make that assessment of when we do the inspections, we do it under HHSRS, and the Housing Act is the overarching legislation that we work under, so it's sort of as a combination of both. I may have not answered that, so if you want to come back on that, Councillor Harrison, afterwards, please do, and I'll go forward. About safeguarding vulnerable tenants, at greater risk. Is that so if we take enforcement action on somewhere, the vulnerability about eviction and things like that, officers are very aware of that, and we would make those assessments and judgments to make sure that if we were to put somebody in a vulnerable position, then we'd work with our other housing colleagues about providing accommodation and things like that if there was a certain risk to that. But the officers that are trained and taking that action do, when they do enforcement, we fill in, if you see in the appendice, there's like a enforcement decision matrix or a form, and that's to allow us to make a decision. So say if we were going to prosecute anywhere, or if we were doing enforcement, we often review that information to determine whether it's the best course of action. So we were always very case by case, on a case by case basis, basically. And then the third part was enforcement of our own tenants, and how we balance that. We currently have, so there's different parts. One part I can't answer because I don't do the tenancy part, so maybe I'll hand over to Sarah McQueen if she has want to add anything. But in terms of antisocial behaviour, because we now have a specific antisocial behaviour officer for housing that sits within the public protection team, so we've got that consistency of action, and we'll have those conversations between each other to make sure what we're doing considers the requirements of the tenant also. But if somebody is breaking the rules, they're off, we have to follow our enforcement policy and take action, and we do consider certain factors, but ultimately sometimes action has to be taken because it's required. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Andrew Goldsborough?
The only thing I noted specifically, you said about which Act of Parliament for the housing standards, and that's the Housing Act 2004.
Do you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Harrison?
Yeah, I can, Chair, please. Yeah, it was just, obviously with your first answer there, Aisha, it was more about how will we avoid confusion for the landlords and tenants, and really with your answer, I'm still a little bit confused as what are we telling them? We need a bit more direction for the landlords and tenants, I think, because we're saying we're using the both of them, and one's overarching on the other one. So I'd just like to know if there's anything more we can give to the landlords and tenants that will stop any confusion. And then the tenancy services, again, I still think I wasn't really answered on that one. It's how we will weigh our duty as a landlord against the duty as an enforcer, which will carry precedence there, which way we'll go on that. So probably that's for Sarah, is it? I don't know.
I'm going to let the cabinet member in because she's indicated, and then obviously I'm going to let whichever officer come back who wants to. So Councillor Moran.
Yeah, I'm just interested, Tim. What is the difference? What's the difference that you've seen between overcrowding, presumably the definition of overcrowding on HSRS or the Housing Act? Is that what's... Well, are they different? I mean, is one saying, yeah, 5 in a 3-bed is overcrowding, the other one saying, no, 6 in a 3? I'm just interested in what the difference is, and understand your concern about which do we go with. Yeah, thank you.
Aisha, yeah, please.
About the first point about how we let landlords know, and that we're going to have a landlord forum. I think it's around the 7th of November, and I'll certainly put this in there, like your suggestion is very valid, and we'll put that in some sort of guidance to try and help. So I'll take that away as an action.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of questions as well. On the so page 21 of the document, it mentions the Lincolnshire Landlord Accreditation Scheme for private sector landlords. I was just wondering if that's compulsory, and if it isn't, how many of our landlords are actually signed up to it, and whether we know. And the other question was on electrical safety standards. It talks about enforcement around non-compliance. We know from experience that that's not a statutory requirement for something you can get a court order to get access to achieve. So I was just wondering what enforcement options there are for private landlords if a tenant is refusing access for an electrical safety certificate, please.
Is that one for you, Aisha? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the first part about the landlord accreditation, I will double check, but I don't believe it's like a requirement, and I don't know how many we have signed up to it, but I can find that information and come back to you at a later point if that's okay, because I don't know the answer offhand. Yeah, so we'll take that away we'll come back with the answer. And about the electrical standards enforcement, because this is a new addition to the appendix updated policy, because we haven't been able to take any enforcement action on this in the private rented area because we haven't incorporated it into our policy. So it would be an optional point. There's a matrix in that in terms of the fines, but often when officers are doing the inspection, it would be advisory initially and say, can you sort this out before it gets to that level of enforcement? But it just gives us that extra ability to take action where those ones that aren't compliant, and that protects our private rented tenants more. So it's really beneficial for us to have that in there. Have I answered that?
Yeah, Sarah, and then councillors waiting to come in. So I'm going to take Sarah first, if that's okay, councillors, and then it's Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just conscious that we didn't answer Councillor Harrison's second part of the question in terms of tenancy services. So the primary aim for us as a landlord is to have our tenants sustain their tenancy. So we have a lot of support available to tenants. We we have our tenancy support officers, and as I said, that we try and work with our tenants to sustain. However, that should never overrule the enforcement side of things. Obviously, at the end of the day, we are a social landlord. So whenever we do need to take enforcement measures, we do, it's basically considered the last resort. Yeah, we've got to balance it with, being a responsible landlord and helping tenants sustain the tenancy. But at the end of the day, we have got to take enforcement action if we need to. So whenever we're entering in, starting the legal process, we do an equality and proportionality assessment to make sure that what we're entering into is a fair and transparent process. And through that, we can evidence, and we must evidence, what support we've provided for the tenant. We need to evidence what vulnerabilities that tenant's got, and that we're aware of them, we've acknowledged them, and we've sort of changed our services if needed to suit that tenant. So as Aisha says, it's a case-by-case basis. But all of those things must be in place before we start that enforcement process. So it's a difficult balance, and we are mindful that a lot of our tenants do have vulnerabilities, but that can't be seen as a way of overriding. We can't not take enforcement measures if someone has got those vulnerabilities. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and as I said, that our main focus is the sustainment of tenancies, and we have that at the front of our minds at all times.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much. I've got a few questions. First of all, with regards to overcrowded, I'm particularly aware that, because I've got one of the highest numbers of HMOs actually, I think, in the district in my ward. How can we monitor? It's very difficult to monitor that, because one of the things we're getting is somebody might move in, and then they bring in their girlfriend or their boyfriend, and then the next thing you know is a friend staying. It's how do we actually monitor that, in practical terms on the ground? What defines somebody's actually staying there as opposed to just visiting? How do we measure that? And what resources do we have around that? Then this links actually, I think, to Councillor Harrison's point earlier. how do we measure where we've got an estate, for example, and you've got the behaviours of one vulnerable resident affecting the quality of life of their neighbouring vulnerable residents? How do we measure that? How do we weigh that up? How do we progress with that? And then, last but not least, wearing my planning hat for a moment, looking at development management side, the enforcement of planning conditions is hugely important to the decision-making process around planning. So I just wanted to ask if we can ensure that we do actually involve the planning committee at some stage in the review of this paper, please. Thank you.
Okay, so Aisha on the HMOs, is that okay? Thank you.
So we have a number of HMOs across the district, and we licence those that have more than 5 occupants, and we have a register of those. When we do our visits or anything like that, it's in response to complaints usually, or like it could be a resident that said has complained about a neighbour, or it could be a tenant that's complained, and then we'll go and do an inspection. So it is difficult for us to review those that are unlicensed about how many occupants they have, because we can't be there all the time. And in terms of resources, we have 2 housing officers and a manager. So if you think about that across the district, we wouldn't be able to monitor occupancy. We just go on information and intelligence from the community. So if you do have concerns within the community, we welcome all that, and we'll look into those concerns, but we don't proactively check whether, you know, if levels are certain amounts higher than what we thought they were. Unfortunately, there just isn't the capacity to do that. That was that part, wasn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you mentioned vulnerable tenants and the impact potentially the behaviour of their neighbours may have on them. So it is a difficult thing for us to try and manage. We obviously have our antisocial behaviour policy in place. If it is constituted as antisocial behaviour, sometimes it's difficult to know the difference between antisocial behaviour and a neighbour dispute. So all I can say is we are mindful and do try and capture our tenants' vulnerabilities, any recognised diagnoses, any disabilities, and we do make sure that we factor those into how we deal with that case. Obviously, it's difficult to sort of generalise because each case is very different, and as I said, it can be a challenge for housing officers to manage, but all I can say is vulnerabilities are taken into account, and if there is antisocial behaviour, I mean, if it is, you know, defined and clearly is antisocial behaviour, that's going to have an effect on anyone, regardless of any sort of vulnerabilities. So we have, you know, stages to manage that, and ultimately, as I said, this is all about enforcement. If it comes to it and we have got proven records that there is antisocial behaviour being committed and it is considered a breach of tenancy, that's when we then look at the enforcement route. But we, again, as I said before, it's about trying to sustain tenancy, so we try and, you know, work with the tenants and see if there is a way that they can get on as neighbours. But sorry, that sounds like a really woolly answer, but it's a very difficult thing to try and manage as housing officers. So we do make sure that, as I said, we try and take everything into account and do as best we can to try and have sustainable communities.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Morgan, or do you want to come back briefly?
I think what's interesting was the point that is it ASB or is it a neighbour's dispute? How we judge that, and it's very difficult because you're in the middle, basically.
I think that's exactly what Sarah's just said. To be fair to her,
I do think that is difficult. If I could just pick up then the last question, if I may, Chair, that, which was around if we can liaise with the planning team.
Yes, certainly. We'll try and work out how we factor that in. That, yes, certainly. And can I just say on the enforcement, the one about is it a neighbour neighbourhood dispute as antisocial behaviour. We also do that within the private rented community and the owner-occupied community. So we have officers that are trained to make that judgment, and we have an incremental approach to enforcement. So we often start with a warning and we engage with people. So we don't go straight to prosecution or anything. We try to engage with those and we work together, whether it's neighbourhoods or housing. We have that working together, and also with the police, so that we can make the right choice in terms of how we investigate and how we enforce, because everybody's got different circumstances. We understand that.
Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my eyes dwell and gravitate to the fly tipping and littering component of the enforcement policy. Thought I'd just raise it just because the whole body of the policy is here. It would be remiss of me if I didn't, because it's a particular headache and running sore in my ward, the Isaac Newton ward. Not a week goes by when you don't go down some of the quiet country lanes there and see a sofa or bags of rubbish, you name it. In terms of the maximum fine, it seems to be a number of cases here where actually a good deal less is levied than that maximum fine. I mean, I think very clearly in my head, the maximum fine should just be the fine in all circumstances. There seems to be some level of discretion afforded here on whether it's a car boot or less, or a small van load, the individual size of the items, location, risk environment, and even oversight or ignorance of the law. And I hope certainly that the fine isn't dialed down because people aren't aware of the law as they should be. So I did just want to ask, firstly, can that fine, the maximum fine, not be increased, or are we shackled by the Environmental Protection Act 1990? I certainly think it should be increased to enhance the deterrent. And then short of that, to put out for consideration, removal of all the lower bandings and simply counting the maximum fine as the fine, the £1,000 for fly tipping and littering at £500. And I think, if nothing else, that would remove the level of discretion, be simpler, and offer a harsher deterrent across the board. Thank you.
Aisha.
Thank you, Chair. So this was discussed at Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee last week. I'm the chair of the Lincolnshire Environmental Crime Partnership, and this is one of the priorities, is looking at this matrix. And the reason that we were looking at this matrix and sort of trialling it as an authority is because it was put forward by Lincolnshire Legal as a best case forward of dealing with these types of offences. And I shall hand over to Andrew Goldsborough so he can give you some more information.
Thank you, Chair. One of my hats I wear, I'm a prosecutor and attend court regularly and have to deal with cases where the fixed penalty notice is not paid and we prosecute for them. There is evidence, clear evidence, that if they are too high, the court will not impose a £1,000 fine for the offence. They will take into account a person's means to be able to pay a financial penalty, and of the, I think it was 10 or so cases I put forward to the Environmental Crime Partnership, there was only one where the fine was equivalent to or greater than the fixed penalty notice. It was my advice to the Environmental Crime Partnership that there was a matrix looked at, because obviously the higher the fly tip, the greater the penalty, and one or two bags, even though it is fly tipping, shouldn't be £1,000. It's not going to be paid. People will go to court and they know they're going to get a lower fine and less cost. So it was done on a basis of what's the cost benefit. In relation to the maximum fine, we stuck with £1,000, and that's what the maximum the government have allowed at this point in time.
Are you wanting to come back, Councillor Green?
Just briefly, I mean, I suppose, the word is deterrence there. I mean, we are going to see these cases arising if people feel that it's within their means to pay. It's just an inconvenient fee rather than a sharp deterrent. So perhaps this rests more with central government lobbying that could be done there. I certainly have that preference that we should just have the two bandings and really hit these people hard. Thank you.
Councillor Knowles, purely for clarity, if the committee recommends this policy, does that mean it goes to Cabinet after today, or does that mean that the policy immediately comes into force? I just want clarity for my own purposes, please.
No, technically, anything that the committee recommends goes to consideration by the Cabinet, not necessarily a result that the Cabinet must undertake. It's not binding, but it's obviously they would consider prior to it coming to the actual Cabinet meeting in its current form. This is the draft policy, and changes can be made to it where necessary. Can I, while I've got the microphone, can I just add two things? First of all, the housing obviously has its special section within in the notes and in the appendix.
Phil, really sorry. Can you? I think you've turned your mic off. Thank you.
Those who've gone through it, and I'm sure you all have, noticed that enforcement itself is a last resort. It's not immediately turned to enforcement. That would not be the normal case. There would be visits, there would be words, there would be warnings, there would be other potential penalties, and only as a last resort would we, as a council, go to legal enforcement. And so every attempt will be made to solve problems without that, so that the problem of difficult people that was sort of brought up that might have become a problem person or problem area for an enforcement team is minimised, but also it's given careful thought before anything is taken to that level. And that's why the policy has been refreshed, that's why it's been renewed and presented for you. And that's why we're here and we're represented today by Lincolnshire, because a lot of the things are legal and they are tied in with things that are going on across Lincolnshire, not just purely within SKDC, so that we try to work together to improve the quality of reducing fire tipping and all the other sorts of things that are talked about in the various policies, as well as just housing. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, personally, I think you've just made a really valid point. You know, this is a policy that goes way beyond housing. It's quite right that the Housing Committee gets to ask questions and so on, but I do think it's fair to say that, you know, quite a specialist legal knowledge is needed to really understand this. That's a personal observation. I'm not saying that anybody else should think that. So on that basis, are there any more questions or comments that people want to make before I put this to a vote, please? Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, it was really just purely Councillor Knowles made the point that this could be subject to further amendment, which might come out of the work with other committees and other partners. So just bearing that in mind, really. If I might just go back on the fly tipping, because actually that's been a major issue in my ward in the town centre as well. And first of all, I'd just like to say that most of it relates to private properties, not to our own properties, but we do have some issues as well. I can think of one particular area where it has been a real hotspot, and I'd just like to say that I think what's really important is the partnership working then between the environmental team, the waste collection team, and our housing department, and identifying who the culprits are, because it's not always easy when you've got an estate or a street and something's just dumped. There is a lot of work that goes behind it, so I'd just like to really recognise that actually and thank those involved in that.
Thanks for that, and I endorse everything you've just said, so thank you. Yeah, so final opportunity to speak, gone. So can I invite the committee, somebody to propose this policy to go to Cabinet, please, as it stands? Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Lane. Okay, so we'll take a vote. All those in favour, please. Okay, any against? And any abstentions? That's one abstention, Lucy. Okay, thank you very much for that. So we move on to item 7, new build and acquisition update. How exciting, genuinely. Councillor Moran.
Yeah, I get all the good gigs, don't I? Yes. Yes, new builds. Thank you, Chairman. I'm always so pleased to update on the new build pipeline, but I'm particularly delighted to say that the Council has just been handed over the 20 apartments at Swinegate from Lindham's. The apartments are a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms, and I've actually been there this morning myself. They're so lovely, I'm considering throwing myself on the mercy of the choice-based letting system. They look great outside, they're great inside. The one I went into had little French windows, which went out into it's like a balcony on the ground, if you get what I mean. But just that bit of space to sit outside on a sunny day, you know. Anyway, moving on. And of course, just in case anybody's been totally incommunicado since the full council meeting, it's been shortlisted for the best housing development at Inside Housing Awards. I think Alison and I are frock shopping, ready for the big event. Anyway, we'll find out in November if we win or not, but I just think it's great that we're up for anything. It's all the other departments winning awards and poor old housing beavering away, and there's nothing for us, so hopefully we'll get lucky. Also this week, construction at Larch Close for 21 new homes has just started. Mercer Building Solutions will be on site for a year building these properties, which include apartments and adapted bungalows to meet the needs of residents from our complex housing list. After a year of delays with having to go back to planning and amend the scheme, I'm really pleased to see that there's actually men there in hard hats doing things. Also imminent, I'll probably be reporting a similar story next Housing OSA to say that Wellington Way in Market Deeping will have started. Cabinet approved the contract for the 1.9 million for the 11 new homes last month. We've had a meeting with Lindham's recently to start looking at the planning conditions and site surveys prior to construction commencing. So, with new build housing delivering some fantastic sustainable new homes, I just wanted to provide a brief update on the disposal of the 12 houses at Lumbys Terrace, which required significant works and will not meet the decent home standards. We had 2 open house, well, I say we, the agent, had 2 open house events which took place. Prior to that, we had 19 confirmed interested parties who'd all checked out, who'd got the funds and what have you. That has resulted in 8 offers from individuals, which is really good because we didn't want a developer to just come along and swoop the lot. So at the moment, 8 people are going forward. Their bids have come in which either meet or exceed the Red Book valuations that we had. So that's currently going through legal. The 4 remaining properties will continue to be marketed, although we have 2 developers who are each interested in 2 properties each, which is fine, it's to be expected. I'm just really pleased that 8 people are going to have a start, you know, they'll start having their own home. That's it. I believe the report is for noting, but if anyone wants to grill me on anything, well, yes, just try not to be too enthusiastic, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Councillor Moran. So, Councillor Johnson.
Well, I'd like to be the first to congratulate you for being nominated. But I wonder how many boxes of Kleenex you're going to take with you, Virginia, if you get it. Yeah. Could I just have an update on this Kesteven Road? Because it's in my ward and it says it's going out to public consultation. Have you any idea when that's likely to be? And what are we looking at developing on there? Can't quite remember. How many houses was it? Thank you.
I'm going to ask the resident expert, if you don't mind, Gloria. Debbie?
Thanks. We're hoping to have some consultation events for Kesteven Road in October, so towards the end of October. There'll be drop-in sessions for the residents, the local residents, and the scheme's for 13 units on Kesteven Road, so that's the old demolished garage, hard standing area, partial of the existing garages, and a tiny bit of the open space.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, brilliant. You know what's gone on. Good luck with that. I hope you do win that one. Just some clarification for me though. How many? I know I've seen it somewhere, but I can't remember. I don't know whether you can tell me. How many homes have we lost through right to buy in recent years, and how far will this programme go to replacing that we've lost? That's one. Then on a tenure mix, on those, do we have a tenure mix on what's going to happen on them? Are we on that new development on Swigate? Is that all going out for rent? Are we? Yeah, right. Okay. And then the yeah, that's it for now for me. Thanks.
How many have we lost through right to buy? I can tell you from 1980, when they first started, we had 10,000 properties at SKDC. We're now down to 5,800. The average... Absolutely not. I mean, we do this building, and as I said today to a journalist, it's a drop in the ocean, really. And it's quite slow going building our own properties, and we've got very little green space left. Plus, I suspect Gloria's going to be one of them. As soon as we try to provide some social housing on some green space, local residents are up in arms about it, and it's a real struggle to get them done. It's not the most cost-effective way of using HRA funds, in my mind. I like to buy from developers because 6 weeks after we spent the money, we've got rent coming in and we've got somebody off the list and housed. As I've just said, Larch Close is going to take a year. That's a year of using HRA funds and, you know, over and over again before we can get anybody moved in, because we don't move people in on building sites. The average loss up until this last year has been about 40 a year. Yeah, we don't know. I think I've said in the past the massive amount of applications that we had when the rules were about to change. Some of those are still going through legal, so we won't know. I suspect the numbers will go up a bit when we get to the end of those for the last 12 months, but then I suspect a severe drop after that, because people are now having to wait longer. They're having to wait 10 years instead of 5. The discounts aren't the same. So, yeah, I've always had two sides to how I feel about right to buy, because I appreciate people want to own their own homes. I know how incredibly difficult it is these days. I mean, my first house cost me £15,000. You know, and I still look at some places and think, but that's a box and it's £250,000. It must be, you know, I can see why people want to buy their council houses. And the other upside is, as we're getting closer to being able to replace like for like, which was always the aim, we might be losing a property that's 60, 70 years old, but we're gaining one that's brand new. You know, it's a better quality house because it's a modern build. It's got things like Swinegate have, it's got air source heat pumps or solar panels or whatever. So it's swings and roundabouts really on right to buy. But I think now it's in the form it should always have been, really. Anyway, that's my lesson for today. Go in peace amongst your people. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. And I agree with you. I think for the last 30 years we've proved we ain't builders. And I think it's better going out and buying the properties as well, personally. But that said, do we have specific criteria when we're buying existing properties? Is there anything, are we going looking for specific ones? And also, do we have many in the pipeline?
Yeah, we've quite a few in the pipeline at Corby Glen. I think it's 46 next year, is it? 36. Can't push it up, no. No money left. Yeah, we've got some next year at Corby Glen and the year after. We do buy specific properties. We bought a couple in Stamford recently, and they're usually for families that we have. We recently bought a 5-bedroom, I think, because we've got 4 or 5 bedrooms, have we? Across the whole district? Not a lot. And their case was quite urgent. So we found somewhere that we could bring to, it was very close to decent home standard, didn't take a lot of putting right. Or it may be somewhere where we can adapt it for specific needs for somebody. So, yeah, we're very picky when we go out and buy, unless they're off plan. But then, and then we can also, if we get in early enough with the developer, we can actually get him to modify the properties to what we're looking for, what we need.
Sorry.
Oh, Alison, please, yeah.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. So just to add to that, before we buy any property, a financial assessment is undertaken by the finance team to make sure that it meets the financial criteria, we get payback within a certain period of time. And we'll also, they have to meet the Red Book valuation, so we'll use a local valuer. They go out and they'll complete a Red Book valuation. We won't pay above the Red Book valuation, and then that will then inform any offer that we make for properties. And the team also work with Sarah's allocations team just to make sure that whatever properties we're buying meet the needs of the people on the housing register. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan, sorry you've had to wait.
That's fine, thank you very much, it's all interesting. I've got, it relates to the fact that we now know Lincolnshire County Council are basically doing a big sale of other assets. And I'm aware just recently of at least one property that actually they own a house. It's in my ward, and I just wondered if there's any opportunity, have we actually considered looking at what it is that they're actually selling, and if there's an opportunity for SKDC to look at those assets and see if there's anything we could purchase.
Debbie, yeah, please.
Thanks. So the County Council work through their one public estate. So when they meet, they discuss other types of properties that are being disposed of. So it will come through that kind of forum, and South Kesteven do attend those one public estate meetings. So we will know about any potential buildings. But as Alison said, we would still need to go through the criteria of assessing those buildings. Is that something that is value for money? We would need valuations. Sometimes if we are buying an asset, if it was something like that, if it's a large cost, and then it would be a large cost to make that property into something fit for purpose. It isn't then viable as an option. But obviously that's the whole appraisal that would need to be done. But yeah, it would be done through one public estate. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So I salute the new build programme, and there's been word about a pipeline. A pipeline's all very well and good, but you can't live in a pipeline. So when do we actually expect people to occupy the new houses? And then at the same time, the Lumbies, there is that feeling of the situation being slightly perverse, where you're liquidating houses whilst acquiring more. I'm keen to understand the exact reasons, or the reason, for the Lumbies being sold off, because I got the press release before me, and yeah, seemed to be a little thin on the detail there. So any kind of meat on the bone you can add to that, I'd appreciate. Thank you.
As regards to your first question about when will people be in, I think it normally takes us about 6 weeks from a property being finished to actually getting someone in there, because we have to advertise them. We don't wait until they are 100% finished, because there's inspections. As soon as they're ready for inspection, we get them advertised, and I think it's usually, isn't it, there is a 6-week process. Generally, it's about 6 weeks before we've actually got someone in there. I think Alison wants to talk about Lumbies, but we have discussed this ad nauseum as to why we had to dispose of those properties. In short, the amount of money that we would have to spend on them to get them to the current decent home standard, let alone the enhanced decent home standard, which is coming in shortly, didn't make them financially viable. We wouldn't have any hope of getting them to a level of efficiency of C, which is what we have to have. We just couldn't do it. We would have been, you know, private developers, different thing altogether. People doing up a home for themselves to live in, different regulations, different rules. Do you want to add anything to that, Alison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to confirm, these aren't the first properties we've disposed of. We disposed of, I think, 5 properties last year. Whenever properties become void, a financial assessment again is undertaken on them. So what works need to be spent on the property to bring it up to a lettable standard, what works need to be carried out over the next 10 years, and then what capital receipt what's the payback period from that for the rental income you receive. And I've completely lost track of what I was going to say then.
Not being viable.
Yeah, so we undertake all of that financial assessment. We'll then look at what capital receipt would get for the property if we were to sell it, and then could we reinvest that into a property that was more, better, more efficient for the tenant to run. So that's the process we go through. It's not just a decision that's made overnight. We've got the asset disposal policy, which was approved by Cabinet, I'm going to say November 24 last year, so it all has to be in accordance with that. It all has to be signed off by multiple officers. It's not just, so I think it's the Chief Exec, the Section 151, I think the Cabinet Member for Housing and the Monitoring Officer all have to sign that off before we can even consider disposing of a property. It's a bit like the properties at Bourne End in Colsterworth. So they've reached end of life, they need a significant amount of work. We wouldn't be able, probably struggle to bring them up to decent home standard, but we've assessed those plots of land, we've met and discussed it, haven't we? Where actually you can demolish those houses. They're not energy efficient for tenants to live in, but we can demolish them and then replace them with more properties which are energy efficient for tenants to live in, makes it more affordable. So there's all of that that goes into the decision-making process. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So this item was just for noting. It's it's good news generally. So any final comments before we move on, please? Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to item 8, the homelessness and rough sleeper update. Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair. This report highlights the continued efforts and progress made by the Council in addressing homelessness and rough sleeping across the district. The Change for Links team continues to deliver outreach and support across 4 local authority areas. A new outreach worker will join the team on the 4th of October, end of the week, to enhance coverage in South Holland and South Kesteven. As of mid-September, only 4 individuals are known to be rough sleeping locally, all of whom are being actively supported. The Council's use of supported accommodation, including a house in multiple occupation, is helping to transition individuals into more stable housing. The report outlines the scale of homelessness casework with 247 active cases and 70 individuals in temporary accommodation as of August. Additional government funding has enabled the creation of new roles and expanded support, including a temporary accommodation officer and a resettlement support officer. Plans to reopen the night shelter for the winter months are underway, and the Council continues to work closely with partners to meet resettlement obligations. These initiatives reflect a proactive and compassionate approach to tackling housing need across South Kesteven. Thank you.
Before I open it up, just purely for, again, my own benefit, my own clarification, is the HMO that's being referred to the community centre on Thames Road, please? Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. It's not the actual community centre, it's the flat above it.
Yes, sorry, I should have made that clear.
Sorry. Okay. Yes,
Thank
it is.
you.
Thank you.
So, anybody else want to come in? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. I think some of them I know the answer to, but probably good for the whole committee to hear. What plans have we got in place? Obviously, we're getting to that time of year now. For rough sleepers during the extreme weather. I know you were looking at working with the ARC and the passage and stuff like that. I'm just wondering how that's progressing. And when will we have that firm decision on the winter night shelter that you were going to work with the ARC on? Because obviously we meet as a group. I meet outside of here with the Beehive and all those people, so we're wondering if there's anything we can link in with you there as well. And how are we going to make sure that the HMOs, again I know this, but it's for you to put out to everybody else, used for temporary accommodation are safe, well managed and suitable for the vulnerable residents? I know how we do it, but if you can explain to the committee, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, the extreme weather and effectively our sweat provision. As you know, last year we had the night shelter. We are planning, I'm probably going to answer your first 2 questions in one. We are planning on reopening the night shelter. We have had challenges around the location of that. As you know where it was last year. We have had challenges in terms of residents in the local area and sort of reservations around the impact of having a night shelter in their immediate area, and we are obviously sensitive to that. So at the moment we're looking at what the options are in terms of location for the night shelter. I know by having discussions with the ARC and the trustees there that they've come up with some suggestions. We're looking at whether or not they are viable. Things like insurance policies, can we take on that building that actually isn't ours? Can we use that as a night shelter? Those type of things we're looking into in the background. So, in answer to your question, we're really hopeful that a night shelter will be open over the winter. We're just looking at exactly where that will be. So, in answer to your second question, when will a firm decision be? When we've found a location will be when it's firm, and I'm conscious it is now October, which surprises me every day, and it is getting colder, so it will be as soon as possible. HMO's safe and secure. Well, the HMO I refer to is actually one of our own stock. So, you know, it is up to our own lettable standard, our own decent home standards. And the people that go in there are fully supported and have sort of, if you like, a support package in place with regular visits, communal areas checked regularly. So it is managed effectively in that way. Thank you.
Okay, Tim. Yeah. Okay, we've got Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Lay, and then Councillor Johnson. So, Councillor Morgan, please.
First of all, when I last came here, we had a number of tents in my ward in the parks, and I'm really pleased and grateful to see there has been huge progress with regards to, in effect, moving or housing properly housing those people. We still have some who are not without homes, but the majority, it looks like, now are. I understand that you have got some more work in partnership with organisations such as MBAS, the Maltings, and that you're doing the more wraparound care, which you touched on actually in answer to Councillor Harrison's question. I really appreciate you perhaps just explaining a bit more about that work and what you're doing there. Can you, if we go look at the night shelter that you're looking at, having met a number of homeless people because of the issue we had in the paddock, etc., they raised a concern that it wasn't available for them to use in the day, and because a number of them had drug issues and reliant on methadone, that actually unfortunately has the impact of in effect making them very sleepy whenever they take the dosage. So it meant in effect they need support for somewhere to sleep in the daytime, not just nighttime, and it was one of the reasons that they weren't taking up the option of using the night shelter. So I just wondered if we've learned anything from, apart from the location, from previous work that we've done, and whether or not we've got a bit more flexibility, or can we consider that, please, regarding their meeting their actual needs. I did have some other points I picked up from them. I'm happy to share outside the meeting, but that was the main one. The other thing is, I hate to say, because I noticed that your last report you gave some figures, but I've just been notified of new tents that have gone up, in one in the paddock and one in Wyndham Park, literally within the last few days. So it's obviously an ongoing issue, which then brings me to my last question, and that is, do we have a mechanism for monitoring if somebody is rough sleeping, how long they're actually in effect on the street, how long they're rough sleeping? Do we have a mechanism then for looking at what their individual needs are and tackling that to get them off? So we don't have somebody, for example, I've had people say they've been up for years actually on the street and felt unsupported, others just a few months, others just a few weeks. How do we manage that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I've written some notes. So first of all, NGAS, so that's short for National Grief Advice Service. Yes, you're right, we do work in partnership with them, which I'm really pleased about. They have offices, or I don't like to call them offices because it's a really informal space down at the Maltings near Morrison's. So we're working in partnership with them. We've started with a homelessness drop-in service on a Wednesday afternoon. It actually started over the summer. I can't remember the exact date, so apologies. But we started it off with it being a cool space because it was so warm over the summer and they've got air conditioning, so it was a bit of a cool space. Obviously now, as I said, I'm in shock that it's October. That will turn into a warm space on a Wednesday afternoon. So that space is available for people to drop in. It is called a National Grief Advice Service, but they use grief in the loosest possible term. It refers to a loss of anything, a home, a pet, a job. So it's not about bereavement. I know there's another abbreviation, the National Bereavement Advice Service. This is slightly I think they work under the same umbrella, but this one is about grief, about loss of anything. So I'm really excited about that partnership. As I said, it's every Wednesday afternoon. Uptake has been low, but if it does increase, we will look to work with them and see if we can open more of those, particularly over the winter period, to provide warm spaces. We have officers that go down there every Wednesday afternoon, bit of a drop-in service. So, yeah, pleased for that to continue. In terms of the night shelter use in the day, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to have a space in the day, but unfortunately, like most things, it comes down to cost. So we try and provide as much as we can, and that does come at a cost to us. So that's, again, why we work with our partners. So we can provide the provision at night, which is a challenge to most of our partners. So we're more than happy, once we find the accommodation, to provide that provision at night. But we can't have it as an all-around-the-clock thing. I fully appreciate what you've mentioned about some people needing to sleep in the day, absolutely, but we can't have that provision all round the clock, down to costing, down to staffing. Obviously, you know, as you're fully aware, there's a lot of clients with vulnerabilities, and we just need to be mindful of that. So we can provide the provision overnight, but then, as I said, we look to our partners. We've got the Passage, we've got NGAS to provide any sort of warm spaces, food, any sort of provision like that in the day, and we link people into that if and when they use the night shelter. Again, if we've got the means to expand that, I'd be happy to explore, but at the moment we're just concentrating on the first hurdle of actually finding the building. So one step at a time. New tents, yeah, we're fully aware of the new tents. We've already visited them. We've got our outreach officers that have been out and about. Sam and Courtney already been to visit the tents, and we're discussing with each individual their needs. As you mentioned, it's a really complex issue, so we just need to make sure that we're discussing with each individual what the housing options are and capturing that and advising them in the best way that we can. You mentioned about rough sleepers. Can we monitor that? Well, it sounds to me a bit like we're tracking them. We can't really do that. It would be, we try to as best we can, not in terms of track them, but try and support them. But at the end, if they do find somewhere to sleep for that one night, or they find a sofa, it's not really then on us to try and track where they are. They can tell us if they'd like to, but it's really hard to keep tabs on where everyone is. Even when they are rough sleeping, they might change the location to try and keep safe, which we understand. There's no onus on them to tell us where they are all the time. I mean, it would be handy because then we can try and keep, going out and supporting them. But yeah, I fully appreciate what you're saying. We do have individuals that state that they've been out on the streets for a number of years, and I believe in some cases that might be true on and off, that, we have periods of time when we see certain individuals, and, our officers know, we have a really good picture of who is out and who is, rough sleeping on and off throughout the district. So we as I said, we don't like to track people, but we have a good picture of the types of individuals that we see and the types of support that we can provide. But as I stress in my report, it's a hugely complex issue. Each case we try and assess on we do assess on their own merit. A lot of individuals have multiple complex needs that we try and address. And as I always say, accommodation is not always the be-all and end-all. It's about that wraparound support. It's about making sure that we can provide that, but also it's about that individual engaging. And that's probably one of the hardest things that we can face at times. So I'm hoping I've answered anything, but please do come back if I missed anything. Thank you.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Morgan? Yeah, by all means, but if you could try and be brief, because we've got now a queue backing up of people wanting to speak.
It's really quick, really sort of like with the government looking at housing now and putting more money in. Have you had any news that there might be more support specifically to address rough sleeping? That was what I was going to ask.
Sarah, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. At present time, we've had nothing in terms of figures confirmed for rough sleeping provision for next financial year. We know what we've got this year. We know that we can run the Change for Links service until the end of the financial year. In terms of next year, we don't know what the figures look like at present. All we do know is the demand for support for rough sleepers and accommodation for rough sleepers is still there, not just in South Kesteven, a national picture. So we wait and hope that central government see that as well and that the funding continues. But as is with most things, as and when they announce the figures and announce the budget that we'll be getting, that's when we can start to plan what the provision will be for next financial year. Thank you.
We also know, just literally stating a fact, that there was a 27% increase in homelessness funding this year as well, of course. Alison.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yeah, the Council normally gets its draft finance settlement information towards the end of December, so I would expect that's when that funding would be released as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lay, I'm working down the queue. Councillor Lay.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a really quick question. Have you got any veterans as rough sleepers or on your active homelessness case list, please?
Active rough sleepers, no. Active homeless cases, I'd have to run a little bit of a report and come back to you on that, if that's okay. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I notice that it says that you've got Serco managing 39 properties for resettlement purposes. Are they doing it for us, or are they doing it for the government for housing refugees?
Thank you, Chair. No, they're not doing it for us, as in the District Council. So Serco manage the resettlement properties on behalf of the Home Office. So it's an initiative that's run by the Home Office. Serco, in this area, are the management company that procure the properties in South Kesteven, and they fully manage everything to do with those properties. We do get notification of the properties that they're seeking to procure in South Kesteven, as they do in all districts, and then we are given the opportunity to feed back, which I have been doing. So the things you can feed back on in terms of the accommodation is, you know, do we consider it a suitable area for resettlement? Are there any concerns? So we do get the opportunity to feed in our concerns or anything else we'd like to raise, but other than that, it's fully managed by Serco.
Thank you. So are we talking about, I'm sorry, I've got to bring this up because it's part of what I want to know. Are they doing this to bring in migrants that have come across the channel, or are they really looking at homelessness and people from our district that need help and accommodation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. No, that's, as Sarah said, that's the scheme that's managed by the Home Office. Homelessness is managed by this council. So anybody that lives within the district that has leave to remain in this country would be managed by our homelessness service. Anybody that is being housed via the Home Office is managed by the Home Office. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It was originally an identical question to what Councillor Lay did ask about numbers of veterans, and I think I would say, with the greatest respect, I think it's interesting that we don't seem to know immediately the exact numbers. What I would want to state is that I certainly hope that they're getting the tailored support that they deserve, and which also comports and matches up to the Gold Award status that we do possess from the Armed Forces Covenant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. As Sarah said, she'll feed that information back. It would actually be our homelessness and rough sleeper manager who would have that exact information, and they're the ones that manage the service. They make sure the relevant support is being provided to any veterans within the area, and they're also, they have a specific, when it comes to our housing allocations policy, there is a specific criteria that relates to veterans. Thank you. But as Sarah said, she'll make sure that information is provided to the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Sarah, go on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to highlight, and as part of the report, just to say there's 247 active homeless cases, so for me to automatically off the top of my head know how many of those are veterans, I just don't have it to hand. It's not that we don't, you know, recognise, yeah, it's not that we don't record it, it's just, it's not on my screen at the moment. And as Alison said, we recognise the Armed Forces Covenant, and we make sure that the allocations policy is reflective of that. So we make sure that anyone recognised as a veteran and recorded, which they are, their banding in their assessment is reflective of the Armed Forces Covenant. Thank you.
I endorse those comments completely from the Chair. Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, it's again really for Sarah, I think. Firstly, I fully understand how difficult Sarah and her team's job is, having learnt in the last 2 years to my own chagrin. Do you feel now that you've got these extra officers now through this funding and that, do you feel that you have enough staff capacity to keep up with possibly rising things, or do you need more help?
Thank you, Chair. We have to, yeah. We obviously we have to work within the budgets that are set with for us. I think each year, you know, I do look at the pressures of the team, and I do try and be realistic with what I can ask for. I'm trying not to smile because I can get carried away, because I'm really passionate about making sure that the team feels supported and making sure that they've got enough staff in place. Yeah. I think that we need to give it a bit of time. So we've got a newly appointed resettlement officer, we've got a newly appointed temporary accommodation officer, and then we're just in the process of going through budget setting for next year, where I've put in a few other things that I'd like to see. So I think we need to give it time for that to kick in. There's also the usual day-to-day things, you know, staff sicknesses, pressure in the team, maternity leave. We've just had an officer that's had a baby, which is amazing. But we've got to make sure that, you know, it goes, I think, I've been in homelessness and housing for 15 years, and I'm always waiting for that day where everything's calm and everything's okay, and you know, we're just all business as usual. And it hasn't come yet, which is why I'm still here and why I enjoy it so much. So I think, probably a bit of a wishy-washy answer, I think we're okay as we are in terms of the staff that we've got and the new things that are coming in, and we just have to keep responding to the pressures, because homelessness seems to go up all the time. It's around 12% a year that I've noticed the number of approaches go up, and it's not just in South Kesteven, again, that's a national picture. So we've just got to make sure that we're on the front foot and we keep responding to that, rather than just saying, yes, please, I want loads of staff. I've got to make sure I've got a business case in place, which is what I do. I'm realistic about it now. Thank you.
Switched the wrong microphone off. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, me and Sarah discuss this on a monthly basis, so if there is extra resource needed, then we can, or we do put temporary resource in place to make sure the team are able to manage the workloads they've got. Ricky Salts has come back to me, the homelessness and rough sleeper manager. We've got 7 veterans going through the homelessness process at the minute. They are all either in accommodation they've sourced themselves, or in previous accommodation but are facing homelessness. So he's was definitely the person to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. I think at Sarah and Alison, if at the least we could have, on Councillor Harrison's question really, if at the least we could have a verbal update on that at our next committee meeting in December. Is it? Yeah, basically. Yeah. Because I have no problem with the answer you've just given, no problem with it whatsoever, but it would be nice to get, how can I put this, a bit more flesh on the bones. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can provide a team structure when we come to the next committee meeting, bearing in mind that it will change because the government, one thing we do know is the government are considering rolling the homelessness and rough sleeping grant into one. We know the change for Links team is ending on the 31st of March, so we need to consider what that actually means for the council and what that team structure needs to look like, because we will be, once we move out the change for Link structure, we'll be delivering a service that is specific to this council, and it might be that we consider broader roles for people within the team, but then that will create additional resilience, but also may mean that depending on funding levels, may be able to look at putting a little bit of additional resource in. But the problem with funding posts through grants is you only, unless we're going to get a multi-year settlement, I don't know what the government's plans are now, that have stepped away from the world of finance. If we get a multi-year settlement, that's great, because that means that it then enables us to plan for the future. But in the past, just getting, and I believe that is what the government's looking at, but getting 1 year settlements at a time makes it really, really challenging to be able to actually plan for the future. Hence the fact that we often look towards putting temporary resource in place, because whilst we recognise there's a pressure within homelessness sits within the general fund, we recognise there's a pressure across the whole of the general fund budget. So it's not just homelessness, it's the council trying to balance all of the priorities that it has. But yeah, we can definitely provide that structure when we next come to the next committee meeting. Thank you.
Fantastic, and I absolutely take everything that you've just said on board, so thank you for that. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the numbers in temporary accommodation. I just wanted to ask, and I'm sure I must have asked this before, or someone must have, in terms of how do we make the decision on whether to put someone into nightly paid or into our own stock? I was just wondering why it doesn't sort of track that if we've got more or less equal numbers, why the nightly paid doesn't go up sort of in comparison to our own stock. Is it to do with sort of what property types we have available, or does that question make sense?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you've probably answered your question. It is to do with the type of properties available. So if we have single people that need one-bedroom properties, we have less available one-bed properties in our temporary accommodation stock than family accommodation. We also, so central government give us guidance around how long ideally a family should be in nightly paid accommodation, and it's no more than 6 weeks, and we adhere to that quite well. So any family that is placed into nightly paid accommodation, we move them out as quickly as possible into family accommodation where we can. It's also to do with the timing. So in terms of, you know, if somebody approaches us at say 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and they need accommodation for that night, the quickest, and don't get me wrong, we know it's not ideal, but the quickest way of sourcing that emergency accommodation is to find nightly paid, and then the following week we find hopefully something of our own stock to move them into. So yeah, it's a multitude of reasons why we unfortunately have to use nightly paid. We'd ideally want to move away from it, but again, it's just the nature of emergency accommodation, unfortunately. Thank you.
Okay, this is just for noting, incredibly important, of course it is, but we don't have to vote on anything, is all I'm saying. So, are there any more comments? Councillor Morgan?
Thank you for persevering with me earlier as well. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to Ricky explaining the process to me, and well done, Ricky, I much appreciated it. My understanding is that if somebody becomes homeless and they are, for example, single, male, between 18 and pension age, and they're not vulnerable, they're not deemed vulnerable, that this is government legislation, that we actually aren't obliged to house them. But they can end up sofa surfing or end up rough sleeping as a result. I just wondered how we are, as an authority, are dealing with those. Am I correct? Is my understanding correct? How are we dealing with those people? Have we any idea how many people who are falling into that gap are?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this centres around something I've mentioned previously, and that's priority need under the homeless legislation. So you mentioned that we don't house people if they don't have priority need. That's technically not always correct. So there's two types of accommodation. There's emergency accommodation and then longer term accommodation. So if somebody approaches us, as you said, between the ages of 18 and, well, any age, we do what's called a vulnerability assessment. If it's a single person, we look to see if we do have reason to believe they're in priority need under the homeless legislation. Now that consists of, we look at any of their vulnerabilities, we look at mental health issues, we look at physical health issues, and we looked at any sort of diagnosis that would mean that we had reason to believe that they are more vulnerable than the ordinary person should they be street homeless. Now, if we do that assessment and we feel that they aren't in priority need, and it's a decision, as I said before, a decision that the council makes, we still have duties towards that person. We don't have a duty to provide temporary accommodation necessarily, but if we accept a relief duty, what's called a relief duty, if they are already homeless, then we have duties to look to help them find permanent accommodation or more permanent accommodation or supported accommodation or something that's going to be more of a long-term solution than emergency accommodation. So it's twofold. It's what's available and what duties we've got to them at the beginning, i.e. is it temporary accommodation or not, and then what we then do with that homeless case going forward. As I said, it depends on the case, it depends on the circumstances, but yeah, you are right, it's around the priority need and how we assess that, and then that determines what duties are owed to that person as they have a homeless application and as they move through our service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. So following on from that then, where would they sit on our stats? Would they perhaps be sitting in our housing waiting list, or is there some other area that we keep an eye on them and how many there are?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's something we record, so I could have a look at our homeless figures and we could see which ones are in temporary accommodation and which ones we've determined we don't have a duty for temporary accommodation. Just to be clear as well, I think you mentioned single males. So just to be, gender isn't relevant in this discussion. So it's any single person that we do the same sort of assessment on. But yeah, certainly I can get you those figures if that's something you would like. Thank you.
Massive thank you to the team for all its ongoing hard work on this. Would colleagues like a break? Yeah. 1:45 then, please. That's 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, well, welcome back, colleagues. So we're on to item 9 of the agenda, Garage Sites Update Report. And I think before I forget, Councillor Moran just wants to address a discrepancy in figures that have been put out on the written report compared to figures that have gone out on the electronic version. Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair. It's not actually figures. It's okay. It's the finance and procurement sections of the report at 1.1 and 1.2. Unfortunately, the report was published in paper form, as it were, before those were completed. However, on the website, the papers that went up on the website are correct. Under finance and procurement, it should read, the financial implications of delivering the actions arising from the ICT strategy will be included in the budget proposals once the strategy has been approved. Moving on to the report, fairly quick. brief update, because I know you're all keen to know what's happening with the garage sites. We're on the verge of accepting a quotation from a company called Edge to provide stock condition reports on all of our 830 garages. I know, 830. That quote is for £38,000. We've hesitated in granting this contract because a bid has been submitted for some funding from Homes England to cover this cost. So the result of that bid is due imminently. So we're just waiting for that. There is money in the budget to cover the surveys if we don't get it, but we thought it was worthwhile holding back for a couple of weeks to see how our bid went. And a proper update will be brought to the committee next year once all the surveys have been completed. So that's it on garages, unless there's any questions.
Councillor Morgan.
Any way of prioritising once we start the work? It's just I do have a request in my ward from a pharmacy who desperately need a garage linked to their business, and they've been chasing me for last year. Do we have? Is there any way that we can put in any requests in if there's a specific need?
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, we can ask for the garages to be reviewed. It's the ones up at New Beacon Road, isn't it? So you can ask for them to be reviewed first. But the garages should be used for people to store cars in. Is it because they want to store a van in there?
Yeah, that's fine then. We don't really want people putting bids in to avoid getting storage space or something like that. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's a great update on these sites. I can see the value, looking how they might be better used. Just a few questions on them. Do we know how many garages are let at the moment? Because I'm thinking of the impact on the residents that may well lose their garage if we decide to develop it. And then the other, would the end plan be to develop themselves or sell those plots on for developers to use?
We need, as regards to the numbers of who's renting them at the moment, I'm not sure we have an exact number, which is part of the reason why we need to get all these reports done, to just see what these, because I know a lot are used for storage, in which case if they don't need it for a car, then they shouldn't really be renting it. I did hear a story that somebody was actually living in one of the garages. I believe that has been investigated and sorted out. So that'll be a movable feast. It'll depend purely on what the stock condition reports come back and say as what we decide to do with them. Obviously, if there's a well-used row of garages which are all being used for cars and they're in reasonably good nick, we're not going to look at doing anything with those. We're not doing away with renting out garages. It can also be quite, as much as we would like to develop garage sites, it can actually be quite difficult because sometimes garages are at the rear of the properties that they serve, and the things like water and electricity and what have you are in the front of the road, in the front of the houses. So it's not economically viable for us to start running all mains and sewage and all that sort of stuff just to be able to put on 2 or 3 new properties. There are other sites where they're attached to some random little bit of green space or whatever. Where if we do clear them and we get the green space as well, because it's not used for anything, then obviously we'll look at developing them. So it just depends what comes back as to which route we go. It may be that we just flatten them and make them into parking spaces. Yeah, it'll be next year. It'll take them a while to get through 830. But I think the price that they've quoted for doing these surveys is very good. I did divide it out. Does it come to 38 quid each, I think, or something like that? Which isn't bad for, you know, somebody turning up and checking them all out. So it's quite good, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thankfully, our tenancy services manager has just recently had to respond to an FOI on garages, and she's sat at the back of the room, and so she's been able to tell me that 435 of our garages are currently tenanted. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Sterling job there. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask what the stock condition survey is going to tell us, but I think you've already told us that. So that's good news. Will we need to ask tenants for access to their garages to carry these out? Or will it be sort of external only? How will it actually work? And it may be a bit of a daft question, but are garage sites included in right to buy? So will we find that there are any random plots that we can't touch?
It's yes to the first, from the smoke signals I'm getting from in the corner, and no, you cannot get right to buy in the garage.
Anything else on garages? No. Okay, thank you for that. So, moving on to, well, big item on the agenda, housing performance data. So, Councillor Moran.
I'm going to hand over to Sarah for this, because there's a presentation to go up.
Thank you. You might have noticed Mark Rogers can't be with us, not very well, so I am going to cover Mark's area, so please bear with me. I have got the figures and I'll highlight the positive things. So first of all, repairs, call handling, well within target, no concerns there. So as of August, 96% of calls answered and handled, so it's really positive, all nice and green. So, as you can see, this only goes up to August, so I have got a bit of a picture since August as well. And also, to put it into a bit of context, I'm going to refer back to figures earlier in the year or last year to show a bit of an improvement. Because although it's still red, I would like to show you how much we have improved. So,
Sarah, really, really sorry to interrupt you, but before I forget, the report sort of made reference on several occasions to there being staffing issues in August. Without naming names or going into huge detail, could you give us a bit more information on that, please?
Could I do that? I think that'll come on to that naturally, because that was more in housing services
That's
side.
absolutely fine.
I don't want to talk on behalf of Mark's area, but yeah, I'll talk more on that when I get to my figures, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, so number of repairs now in WIP down to 2,969. So that has come down since August. That's really good news. Just to give you an idea, again, to refer back to April 24. So the number in April 24 in WIP was 3,798. So a vast improvement of nearly 1,000 down on that figure so far, so that's really good. The number of overdue, as you can see, June, July, August, it is moving down, and now the current figure is 1,705. And again, to give you an idea, so this is the second one down, number of overdue works. To give you an idea and to put that into context, April 24 we had 2,965 jobs work overdue. So again, it's still in red, but just to show over the last year the vast amount of improvement that we've done. So it's really positive for the team. Next. Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. So on this, look, there's a green box. I don't know if we get a round of applause, but emergency repairs completed on time 100% in August. That's really, really positive. As you can see, it's only green when we get to actually 100%. So even 99% it wouldn't have been green. But so yeah, it's really positive, amazing work done by the team. Number of overdues, again, that's coming down. So this is in-house repairs. So number of overdues is coming down. And to give you an idea, so the one above the green, I'll go back to the red one, sorry. So one above the green in August, 1,405. Again, to give you an idea, in February that was 2,111. Sorry, Virginia's giving me a face.
The figures that are in the papers aren't those.
You're on the next slide. We're on the next slide now. Sorry, apologies everyone. Yeah, the green one with the green on it. No, it's okay. Don't confuse me. It's too many figures as it is.
It's 2 words.
And doing a cracking job of covering marks. Apologies. So yeah, just to highlight again, as I said, February 25, the overdues were 2,118. We're now down to 1,405. So again, a vast improvement on those. Next slide. So reactive repairs. Mine's in black and white. It really doesn't help, but you'll see a lot of green on this one, which is amazing. So Mark's noted that we're focusing on updating our systems and focusing on the overdue jobs. So it's really positive. That's a nice green slide. Reactive repairs, so again, a bit of red, but you can see the figures are improving. The number of overdues have gone up, so we do note from June, July, August, the number of overdue jobs has gone up slightly, something we wouldn't like to see, but to try and tackle this, we are getting new contractors, they're being mobilised, and a new repairs, sorry, I can't read the marks right. New repairs manager has now started, so we had an interim manager for a period of time. We've now got a permanent repairs manager started a couple of weeks ago, so we're hoping to see a bit of focus and improvement on those number of overdues. Damp and mould. So again, just to put into a bit of context, sorry, bear with me. Repairs overdue. Yeah, so number of damp and mould repairs overdue, as you see, that's a red line sort of in the middle. That is coming down vastly. It's still red, unfortunately, but it is coming down. And again, to give you a bit of context, in May we had 406 overdue. So to go down to now 241 is a vast improvement. So just to highlight that. Yeah, sorry, I think that's everything to highlight on that one. And this one's very green. So the voids, everyone hopefully is aware of the massive improvement the voids team have made over the last year or so. So that's resulted in a very green slide that everyone's happy with. So August, we were down to number of voids in WIP was 68, and that continues to improve. So again, to put that in context, number of voids in WIP as of January this year was 114, and that's gone down to 68. So it's amazing improvement.
We're at 61 as at the end of this month.
So 61 as of the end of September. So again, even further improving.
So that's sorry to interrupt again, but that's fantastic news. That's brilliant progress.
It's amazing, the team.
So, and I'm sort of playing devil's advocate a little bit in my next question. Do these targets actually need revisiting to be even more ambitious on the back of the progress that's being made?
I'll hand that over to Alison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't sure whether this microphone would work or not. We will start to plateau out. So at the minute we get about 45, I only noticed I met with the team earlier today, 45 voids a month, and we're turning over about 52 a month. But that will plateau at some point where it will start getting 45 a month and then we'll return 45 a month. It's just because there was a backlog. Obviously we're trying to reduce that backlog down. The team's aim is to have the number of voids running between 50 and 60. The ideal would be 50. So if we start to see it creeping back up again, then we'll obviously hand over a few more to contractors. But we're also very conscious about also trying to manage within the budget limits as well. So some of our major voids come at quite a significant cost. So a major void will we charge as much as we can to capital, but they still probably have between £12,000 and £14,000 revenue costs associated with them. So we're very conscious about actually trying to manage within those budget limits, but also making sure that properties are being turned around as efficiently as they can be, so that people have properties to live in. Next year, I think our average void time reduces down to, I think, 60 days. So that's where we'd like to see it sitting. We've also had an internal audit completed recently on voids, and that's what their internal audit view was, that we need to be managing our targets against Housemark. So I think that's what we'll look to introduce going forwards, because Housemark is the industry standard. So really we want to be operating within what other councils are operating within as well, because we also need to recognise the other financial pressures that are within the system as well, both with voids, repairs. AWAB's law came into force in October, and that has really strict timelines that we need to stick to. So we're expecting there to be some financial pressures associated with that, and plus the government has recently consulted on a new decent home standard, which could also introduce new financial pressures on the council. But we're not expecting any additional funding to come through to resource those potential funding pressures. So whilst it would be great to continue to see an improvement throughout voids, we have to recognise at some point it needs to plateau, because there are other financial pressures and other pressures within the system that we need to be managing as well. Thank you.
Apologies. So moving on to customer satisfaction, repairs, overall satisfaction. So once we get in and do the works, the satisfaction with those works is always remaining quite high, so that's really positive. Although it says direction of travel's gone down, it's still at around the 90%. We're down to 88%, but again, still green and over the target, so that's really positive. Next. So planned works. Mark's put, from April to September, we're mobilising contracts, we're validating surveys, and we hope to deliver those between September and March next year. Warm homes, so warm homes has started. We've got 109 to work on, and we've started working on 17 of the warm homes. Oh, okay, that's fine. So asset management, one thing to point out here, the number of properties failing to meet decent home standards has massively reduced, as in we've done the works and we've gotten up to decent home standards, which is fantastic. All of those 173 properties are on programme for the works to continue and for them to be worked on so that they do meet the standard, so that's all positive on that one. Yes. Alison might have to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much of that is the refusals. I don't understand why we would get a refusal to do improvement works to a house, but it's another mystery, isn't it? What sort of numbers are we talking about on refusals?
I think it's, I've moved the slides forward again, I don't know how to move it back. I think it's just slightly further down. I think we've actually got 14 that don't meet decent home standard. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, 14. So there's 170 properties that don't meet the decent home standard, but when you take the refusals out of it, it's 14. So it's roughly about 159 refusals. I mean, we'll get refusals where... well, yeah, I mean, refusals, it's if some people are happy with the kitchen they've got, they don't want a new kitchen put in, and it can be down to, because they might have complex vulnerabilities, which means we need to work with them, so then they're able to manage people going in to undertake those works. You can have elderly people who don't want the disruption, so on the warm home scheme, we had... comments from one of our residents, and they said, I don't want an air source heat pump, I can't cope with the upheaval, but I'd like the solar panels. And we're now in discussions with this tenant because you need to have both for it to meet the terms and conditions of the grant, but having an air source heat pump fitted it's quite a lot of upheaval. And she's I think this tenant is like the late 80s, early 90s, and they don't want the upheaval that goes along with that. So what we'll do is we'll continue to work with those tenants, and then we'll undertake the works at void. If they're happy with the kitchen they've got, we won't force them to have a new kitchen. It could be that, it might have reached the age limit of the kitchen, but they just don't want it changing. But as I say, we don't not work with them. We continue to work with them in the hope that, at some point we'll be able to gain access to do those works. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to stock condition, Mark's noted that the focus will be to complete all outstanding stock condition surveys by the end of this year, and our aim is to complete 1,100 by the end of December. So we're on target to do that, and again, it's all looking positive with those figures. Okay, so moving on to an area I do know what I'm talking about. Allocations and lettings call handling. Again, it's an area of massive focus for both teams. It's the call handling. There's nothing more frustrating than customers ringing through and not being able to get through. So I'm proud to say that this slide remains green. The number of calls handled and the percentages is ever increasing, so it's something I'm really pleased of, and I know that the team focuses well on. Where the percentage of, just I wanted to point out, the percentage of abandoned calls, that's not that we put the phone down or we don't answer always. When people call the council, it does actually, there's an automated message that says we do have online services that you could perhaps use. So some people, when they hear that, put the phone down, and that's classed as an abandoned call. So even the 4%, it's not always because we haven't answered. It might be that they decide to access our services through the website. But still positive. So housing options, so I think a lot of this was mentioned in my report already, but the number of temporary accommodations, it's staying steady at around 65, 70 throughout the summer months. Nothing on here that I wouldn't expect to see. The number of homeless approaches slightly increased throughout the summer. Again, something that we would normally expect to see. And the number of active homeless cases is sort of staying stagnant around the near on 250 mark. Number of rough sleepers, you'll see in June was 15. We knew last time we had the committee was June, and there was a lot of tents at that point. So we can see in those figures that the numbers have gone down. It was 6 in August, and as I put in my report, as of September it was 4. So we are continuing to improve those figures and working those people on the streets. Allocations, a point to note on this one, and this is perhaps where I can address the staffing. So you'll see the number of housing register applications waiting for assessment, that has massively increased. I don't think it's because we've had more applications received as such. it could be. We have a high number of applications that come in, but over the summer months we have had, we've struggled with staffing. We've had long-term sickness, we've had long-term absences from work. It's not something that we just ignore. It just takes a bit of time to cover people that aren't in. We have got some agency workers in position now to help us with the backlog of the housing register applications, and we've got longer term options as well to stable our teams again. So it's not that we don't have the roles available, it's just trying to manage, as I said, sickness, long-term absence and the effect that has on workload. That said, that is a massive focus for myself and Alison, and the team know that the number of complete housing register applications to be assessed, we're prioritising at the moment. We've got officers doing overtime in agreement with us. They would like to do some overtime, so we've got officers working on that. So I hope to see in the coming months that figure reducing.
So Sarah, once again, sorry for interrupting or coming in, but again, without going into any specifics, is the staff sickness situation in August, is that improving, generally speaking?
Yes, as I said, yes, it is improving. Staff, members of staff have returned to work, and as I said, we've got agency staff in for the interim while we recruit to other positions. We've got a housing options officer position and a housing options assistant position, which we've just gone through recruitment, and we've got interviews lined up for those. So yes, it is improving. I'm hoping it was a short-term blip, if you like, but as you can see, it has an effect on the workload that we've got. The other thing it's had an effect on is the number on the housing register. So you see it's dropped from June 1,100 around there to 1,000, near 1,000 people. Obviously people do get rehoused, but equally they do join the housing register. We also have annual reviews of applications, and we have some people that decide they don't want to be on the housing register anymore. So it's always a fluid number, but again, where we've rehoused people and we've got the backlog of applications to assess, it's meant that new people aren't necessarily joining at the moment. However, it will improve. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. It's something that we know and we are working really hard to tackle. That said, it's not had any really much impact on the number of offers made during the month. That's stayed quite consistent. Obviously that's split between South Kesteven Properties and Housing Association, where they still advertise their properties through us, and the number of adverts as well. You know, we're still, despite the number of assessments not being, we're still advertising properties and we're still able to make those allocations. Thank you. So moving on to tenancy management. I'm conscious my slides aren't as colourful as Mark's, but it's difficult to have a target of how many people approach us. This is just the figures. We can't have a target of how many ASB cases we deal with, and then that's that. So I will think of a way of making this a bit more colourful, but I've not got there yet. The number of ASB cases you see was quite large. The number of ASB reports in June, July, August, quite high figures. Katie will vouch for this. It's something we expect to see in the summer months. You know, the sun comes out, the daytime drinking might increase, and we have a number of reports that we try and manage, and perhaps neighbour disputes and that type of thing. So it's a trend we see throughout the year. That has been an increase through the summer months.
Sarah, again, sorry to pause you, but I think we've got some questions on this slide. So Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Morgan, and then Councillor Lay. So Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I don't know, if I'm honest. I'll have to look at the reasons why. I might be able to pass over to Katie. Yep, she will have an answer.
Thank you. So we will also let to people, so they'll be transferring internally, but they still need to end their tenancy at their old property. So they terminate that tenancy at their old property so that they can sign up to the new property. And also we have ones where people are deceased as well.
I understand what you're saying, Katie, but it says here number of sign-ups was only 35, and that's dropped in August, and yet the number of terminations has gone up, so it does a little bit, but not significantly.
Yeah, I think you make a valid point. I think I'd have to do a bit of background research into, we look at the reasons why people terminate, and we can do a bit of analysis as to why that jumped, whereas, like you correctly say, the number of sign-ups, it actually dropped, so we'd have to do a bit of digging in terms of what they're... Yeah.
I think Katie wants to come in.
So they'll also sign up to housing associations, so we nominate housing associations, so we don't do those sign-ups. The housing associations do those, so they're just SK sign-ups.
Councillor Lays was the same question, so Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. So I need to go back to your allocation slide. So I had my hand up, but it didn't get spotted. We've got our banding visible here. Is there a way we can understand, my understanding is people can say what type of property they want or where. Is there, do we know roughly what the figures are around, for example, bungalows versus houses, so we can kind of consider that when we're looking at our new builds or purchases?
Yeah, so that probably comes back to the report we had earlier in terms of new build and acquisitions and the demand that we have for those. The answer is yes, although I don't show it in this report. I mean, I could break it down further if you would prefer to show the numbers in each band and then the type of property that they're eligible for, and it gives you an idea of which one is in each band. I might need an extra slide to do that, but I can do that next time if you'd like.
Alison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, as per when we were discussing the new build report, when we are building properties or acquiring properties, we will have a look what the need is on our housing register before making those decisions. So, for example, Larch Close, we specifically amended the plans for that to include 2 fully adapted bungalows to meet the needs of people on our complex housing needs list. The same as if we were to go and build 1-bed flats, we would check whether there was a demand within the area for 1-bed flats, because you don't want to saturate a market and then find actually you've got no tenants to put into them. So that forms all of the decisions that we make prior to us committing to any development or acquisitions. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've, just to highlight where you said the number of tenancy checks, it's not 0, it's broken. Yeah, I think I'll think of a way of making that clearer. So underneath, we do 6-week and 9-month tenancy checks, and then that's broken down there of the number we've done. As you've seen, June, a massive spike of 9 months. So I'm squinting even though I've got it in front of me. A massive spike in the 9 months checks, and it's just how many we had to do at that point in time, and so the team go out and make sure that they prioritise those. So it's just showing you how many they've done. Number of evictions is 0, which is great. We don't, despite what anyone thinks, like doing those. There was one in July, and as we said before, when the enforcement policy report was presented, it is the last resort. And it's not something we like doing. So you can see the number of evictions we actually get to is very, very low. And that was it. That was all I was going to highlight with that one, and it's over to Alison.
Thanks, Sarah. Phil can't be here today. He's in Lincoln at an event. So I'll just talk you through this slide. But I might go back down there because I need the report and I can't. sorry, we'll find a better way of doing this next time so that we're not jumping around all over the place. So, no, sorry, just bear with me. I just need to go into the report. It was sent through as a late agenda item. Why have I not got the report that goes with it? There was there was a written report that went with it. Oh. Okay, I'll just talk you through it. No, that's tenant satisfaction. Sorry, there was a report that went with it. I'll get that circulated. I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, that's great. Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, sorry everyone. Right, there we go. Yeah, I think Phil's doing some sort of emergency planning. So Legionella, that remains at 100%. Gas, safety inspections, that has remained at 99.26%. So there are currently 41 properties without a gas safety certificate, but 7 of those have been made safe. So therefore we don't count them in the non-compliant figures. So there's 34 properties that are currently non-compliant, so we continue to work with tenants whilst we apply for court warrants. I think we get 30 warrants at a time, so I say we'll continue to, because we'd rather gain access than have to force access. Yeah, these are all access issues, so we go through the process. I believe we have 3 attempts, and if we can't get in, then we then apply to the, it's the only thing we can apply to the court to force access for. Electrical inspections, that has continued to increase, so we're up to 200 and down to 258 there. Phil sent me some figures through earlier today. We are actually down to 220 at the end of this month, so that's continued to improve. Again, we're working with SureServe to try to gain access to those properties, but we haven't got the same access, we haven't got the same rights as we do with gas, so it does make it more challenging to undertake those. All of the other compliance areas remain at 100%. And then, following a meeting with the regulator in end of July, Karen, we have an annual meeting with the regulator of social housing. They said we should really be reporting remedial actions as well to the committee. So these are the remedial actions that are associated with the fire risk assessments that are undertaken. So we had 923 outstanding actions, but 185 of those are just recommendations, so you don't have to do it, it's just you can if you want to. There's been a real focus on getting the 30 high cleared this month, so most of those, if they haven't already been cleared, then will be cleared within the next week. And the new repairs manager has now got, and Sarah's team are focusing on reducing down the number of mediums. So we've got a fire safety group that meets on a monthly basis where we monitor the completion of these actions. We do have a date when they need to be completed by, which is obviously what we're always striving to achieve. If I give you an example of some of the high actions, it was remove there was a candle somewhere and they said, could you remove the candle? The hand gel containers that were put in during COVID, it wasn't clear whether the liquid in there was flammable or not, well, the hand sanitizer was flammable or not flammable, so it's going to remove those from the wall, and it might be where you've got some wood piled up somewhere, so go and remove those. So that just gives you an idea of what the high fire risk actions are. They're not necessarily they don't come at a significant cost. It is just basic things that we need to do, get out there and get them cleared off, which is we have been focusing on. So if they haven't already been cleared, they will be cleared within the next week. And so between May, June and July, well, between May and August, we cleared 448 actions. So I think that does show there is a real focus within the teams to be reducing those actions down as quickly as possible. Is that the last slide, Sarah? Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So obviously happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such a comprehensive report, and I really like the format as well for what it's worth. Yeah, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's clear there from the data there's been some great progress made, particularly on the voids and the compliance levels and everything. Just a couple of questions I'd like to ask is, how can we improve the damp and mould performance, you know, the responses to it, and do we have a dedicated resource for damp and mould, given the health risks involved? And then the other one was, what's HRA? I've got a load of questions, but rather than put you on the spot, I'll send them direct to him. The other one was the HRA overspend, currently forecast. What impact could this have on any housing investment plans that we've got?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you say housing investment, do you mean new builds or, yeah? So new builds are funded from right to buy receipts. The repairs and decent homes works. Repairs are funded from revenue funding, revenue reserves, and the decent homes works are funded from the major repairs reserve. So the right to buy is ring fenced. Damp and mould, we do have a dedicated damp and mould team who go out and survey the properties. They undertake whatever works they can. Some of the, and they'll monitor the position as we go through. Some of the overdue repairs are because we're probably waiting for things like vents to be put into properties. So we're relying on a contract to come in and undertake those works. We have just appointed 2 repairs contractors. I think Cabinet approved the award in September. So we're just mobilising that contract. So what we've done is we've created capacity within the system to support with meeting those timelines. We've also got a temporary team in place as well who support the permanent team, recognising the significant amount of work that we need to complete. So, I mean, there has been significant improvement. In March, we had 875 repairs jobs that were work in progress, and by August we were down to 407. And I think probably just to give a little bit of context about the non-emergency repairs completed on time, we implemented a new repairs and maintenance policy earlier this year, which put in a 60 working day repairs target. Prior to that, I think there either wasn't a target or the target was 12 months. So in some respects, we've imposed our own overdue non-emergency repairs, because that's our aim, is to get them completed within 60 working days. Had we not implemented that target, obviously it wouldn't be sat at a red, but we're really keen to make sure that it is a responsive service. So the line to really focus on is the emergency repairs, that we are undertaking those, and that will be focusing on AWAB's law. It's getting in there, getting it treated, getting the mould removed from the properties, and then the works that come as a consequence of that will then be monitored within our own timelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lay.
Thank you. My question is just on voids and the average time the property is handed back, which has gone down by 25 days, which is amazing. Is this with all the works completed, or do we move people in with still some minor repairs to do?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am reviewing that because somebody has raised that may be happening. As far as when I've looked at all the reports I've looked at, the only thing that may be outstanding is the garden works, but we wouldn't want to be seeding a garden before somebody moves in, because otherwise there's nobody to maintain it, and so we'll end up doing the works twice. So that from all of the reports I've looked at, when they've gone out and done the voids inspection, the only works that I've been able to identify to date that haven't been completed by that inspection are the garden works. But whether what I just need to determine is whether they are completed before the tenant moves into the property, or whether they're done when they're actually in the property. But myself and Katie did go and visit a property, and the tenant specifically asked us not to seed the garden until they'd actually moved in, do any garden works, because he said if you do it before we move in, the weeds will come back, there'll be nobody watering the seed, and that will die. So therefore it's then going to be creating more work after the event. Thank you.
I think that's absolutely understandable, And, you know, to be honest, I don't see a problem that if somebody wants to move in and there are still some minor repairs to be done, as long as there's an agreement, I'm not saying you're doing that, but as long as there's an agreement, I personally don't see that as a problem, as long as the residents are happy for that to happen. So, thank you for your reply.
Agreed. Councillor Baker.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to come back on the damp and mould that Councillor Harrison just sort of mentioned. We absolutely see a decrease from March, but that's kind of going to happen, isn't it, with the warmer weather? So I'm just wondering how we are anticipating sort of meeting the higher needs in the winter when the windows are closed and the heat is on and mould obviously increases.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. As I said, that's one of the reasons that we've now got contracts with 2 large repair firms, so that we have got that capacity in the system. There'll be KPIs built into the contract to ensure they're meeting the timelines that need to be met. The most important thing is that we get the property surveyed. If there are any, we have to look whether there's any category 1 hazards, so that comes back to your HHSRS, is that we're dealing with those straight away, so going in treating the any damp and mould, and then getting the remedial works undertaken to prevent the mould and damp returning in the future. So there's like a lasting solution for the tenant. And we also work with the tenants as well, so that if they need to make any, you know, sometimes if you're drying your washing, just make sure you've got your window open a little bit just so the room's vented. So some of that is us just working with the tenants just so that we can prevent any issues going forwards as well.
So is that increase in staff just for those winter months, or is it, or is it going to be all year round?
So it's a 5-year contract we've got with Foster's, I think it's Lukeman Electrical. So we do a value up to a certain value, because then that just ensures there's enough capacity within the system to deal with those peaks and troughs. Because as you quite rightly say, we do see a spike in damp and mould reports during the winter months. So last year, we also used a third-party surveyor to go out and support the process as well, recognising that our own internal surveyor has only got so much capacity in the system, and that was also one of the reasons for creating the temporary damp and mould team, to get that additional capacity. There's also a surveyor that sits within that team as well that can support the process, because it's not just about going out and surveying the properties, we also need to go out and inspect. I think it's 6 months afterwards, just to make sure there hasn't been any damp and mould that's come back as well. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So what I'd like to talk about is just averages and what they can do. So, I mean, within an average, one function they serve is to conceal, and by that I mean what we haven't got visibility of specifically with voids is the overall distribution. And I would suspect that on that there might be a very fat tail indeed towards the extreme end of those voids that sometimes take hundreds and hundreds of days to actually turn around and then to let out again. So I'd like confirmation of that void which does represent that extreme end. What void has actually accrued the most time it's been void, apart from the average? I think the numbers are now such that I think we would benefit as a committee on the transparency front, within reason, having all of those voids actually listed out, as long as that's permissible on the addresses. But even if that's not allowable, you know, approximate location or very certainly the rent foregone, because I think what we don't have an idea of, a grounding of, is the opportunity cost here. So every void is obviously meaning that we're being deprived rent. But we don't know what the financial impact of that is. And I suppose there's different ways you could cut that. It could be year to date within the financial year, or on a year ago, etc. But I think we would all benefit from a deeper level of understanding of what's going on with the voids. It's very easy to have an average, but it means we haven't got visibility of this overall distribution. And there may be some on that right-hand side that have been void for a considerable length of time, and that are costing the council money that we just simply aren't aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I mean, what I would propose is including a date of what the oldest void is in the system. Bear in mind, this is quite a lot of data here already, but I think we could give you the date of the oldest major void, the oldest minor void, the TA voids are literally turned over in days. They come in and they come out. And we do also have the information. I don't know if the stat map report's gone live, but there is a stat map report that shows all void properties, which all members are able to access. As to the void income loss, the rental income loss to voids, we could include that, but that's actually monitored by, that's part of the Finance Committee's responsibility to actually monitor that, because that forms part of the budget monitoring for that committee. So that I do believe that information's presented, isn't it, Councillor, to your committee. But yeah, I mean, we could, there's nothing to stop us from including the figure here, but it would have to be once it's been presented to that committee, because it is that committee's responsibility to be monitoring that. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously I clocked that it's on stat maps, but I think it remains a useful addition, and it's also for the residents, for the public as well, and for the press to scrutinise at the same time easily. Thanks.
Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. When we're looking at the, going back to damp and mould, do we have a mechanism for prioritising, for example, if they're children or babies or a health condition perhaps of the resident, somebody with asthma or something like that?
Well, we need to prioritise in accordance with AWAB's law, so and HHSRS. So if we have to treat Category 1 hazards as a priority, that has to be the priority, and then all of the works will be scheduled in. So we complete everything in accordance with AWAB's law. So, for example, if we went in and something had a very low hazard in, but somebody was asthmatic, we can't prioritise those over an Category 1 hazard, because that's got a much higher priority to it, and that would be significant to whether somebody's got a health condition or hasn't got a health condition.
So if you had, for example, a number of priority ones, is there within that banding any form of prioritisation?
No, we have to complete it in line with AWAB's laws. We can't breach those timelines. So if for example, if it has to be dealt with within 14 days, it would be dealt with within 14 days, but we have to, if we started prioritising different properties, we might then end up breaching timelines for other tenants and leaving them with hazards for longer than the council should do. Yeah, but the timelines are really, really short. It's not as if you people, so treating damp and mould, it has to be treated within, Category 1 hazards need to be treated within days. It's not something that's left for months does that? Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Harrison and then Councillor Lane.
Sorry, Chairman, I was just going to say all that information is on stat map, that's all. You click on the individual one and see the exact dates.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. On the reactive repairs, appreciating that Mark's not here, so might not be able to answer this question from the floor. For the overdue repairs with other contractors that aren't SureServe, that's a lot in the red. Are they being taken off to do sort of other projects and look after the damp and mould, or do we know what's going on there? And do we know sort of how the decision is made on what repairs are allocated to who, please?
Some of it will depend on volume of repairs coming through, but as I said, it's part of the overdue repairs is because we've now introduced a 60 working day completion date for all repairs, which wasn't in place prior to the introduction of the new repairs and maintenance policy. But this is also the reason that we've just got 2 formal contracts in place for contractors to support us with completing these works, because then that allows us to implement the relative KPIs that are required as part of the New Procurement Act. So I'd expect to see these numbers starting to come down just because there's now more capacity in the system to be providing. We're just mobilising the contracts, and then I'd expect those numbers to start to reduce down.
One from me before we move on. I think it's fair to say the housing department has been on one hell of a journey, and it's been an incredibly positive journey, and it's been a joy to witness it. But obviously, there's always room for improvement. So, based purely on this data, and there's a lot of data, and I guess this is to Virginia or Alison, whoever wants to answer it. There's so much work being done, but good work being done, but what at the moment, if I backed you into a corner and said, what is your absolute number one priority for continued improvement, what would it be, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the first one would be reactive repairs, because we want to reduce the numbers down there. But the other key focus needs to be stock condition surveys and HHSRS surveys, because it's really important that as a landlord we have a clear understanding of the condition of our properties. Thank you.
Can I badger you for a reply, Councillor Moran? You don't have to, of course. Right, sorry, I didn't. Right, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Sorry, go on, go on.
Just say, on this oldest void, I'm absolutely positive that when we did the big report on voids, that information was in there. I'm sure it was. Yeah. So maybe we're just getting up to date, then we can see how much shorter the list is now. Because when we took it on, there were properties that had been empty for years and years and years, haven't there? There isn't now. So if we're going to have a poke at something, we'll have the history as well, I think. Thank you.
You can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I think one of the oldest voids we've got is actually being signed up this Friday. I can't recall the date this property became void, but it was, the condition we got it back in was absolutely terrible. There were holes smashed into walls. But one of the key delays has been we needed National Grid to move the electricity within the property, because we did reposition the kitchen. They'd made the house a lot more, if you want, more family friendly for the tenant. The configuration of it was significantly improved by the voids team, but I think that is going to be our oldest void. We've got the rest of them. I spoke to the voids manager today, and they're handing properties over to contractors within about 7 working days of them being handed to the council. We go out and survey them. We determine whether they're minor or major void, and if it's a major void, we're handing them over in about 7 working days. That wasn't happening this time last year. It's taken a lot longer to get them handed over. So then it's just the level of works that contractor actually needs to undertake on that property as a major void. That's an extreme. I mean, that's really extreme, getting property back in that level of condition. Normally it's new kitchens, new bathrooms, new windows, get those works done, and then the properties get handed back to us. And sometimes it's the level of clearance that properties need as well. So we are looking at alternative ways of clearing houses and gardens to reduce the cost down, so we're not relying on the contractor to do that. It's trying to have a look at what internal resource we've got, and then obviously we're handing clear properties over to contractors rather than them having to get people in to then clear the properties out when they're handed over. Thank you.
Again, thank you to all the staff for all the fantastic work that they're doing. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 11, the independent review of sheltered housing. Councillor Moran.
That'll be me, Mr. Chairman. So we have currently got somebody undertaking a review of the service charges that are incurred across our sheltered housing scheme. So that primarily relates to community room charges and the like laundrette, the shared laundrette charges. They're also looking at gas and where people have got the district heating system, how those costs are recharged to tenants as well. We're expecting a report within the next couple of weeks, but they're also taking this opportunity to also have a look whether there are services the council provides which we could charge for, but we don't currently charge for. So I'd expect a comprehensive report to be brought back to this committee when we next meet. Just to give you a level of, it has been a really detailed review. The person that's undertaking it for us has visited every sheltered scheme across the council so they can get a clear understanding of the conditions of the communal rooms, how well used the communal rooms are, if they're not used at all, are there alternative uses for them, so could they be converted into alternative accommodation. They've also looked at areas where we have bedrooms which people rent to stay in if they're visiting people. If they're not used, then how could they, is there an alternative use for those as well? So it has been a really, really comprehensive review. So I'd expect to be able to bring a report back to the next committee, and then with some proposals in. It would then need to go out and consult with tenants, and then either bring a report, depending on what the consultation feedback is, bring a follow-up report back to this committee or go to Cabinet. It might actually form part of the budget report because council have to approve any charges, like new fees and charges or anything. So I suspect the fees, normally fees and charges get approved by council in January. So I'd hope to be able to take something along with that report as well. If not January, then it might have to be a supplementary report to the budget report that goes in March. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison, followed by Councillor Morgan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I raised it quite a while ago. A lot of the sheltered accommodation is in my ward, and as you know, I've raised a lot of the issues with it, so it'd be really great to see this report when it comes back and see where we are with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, can I clarify, there's a mobility scooter review taking place. Will that be part of this? Because there's reference to potentially charging. I just wondered if it's coming into this or if it's a totally separate exercise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, the mobility scooter policy is separate to this. So the initial stages are introducing the policy. I mean, we've brought it to the committee several months ago, and the initial stages of it are actually is just knowing who's got a mobility vehicle. It's not just scooters, it's mobility vehicles or battery operated vehicles, that they are adequately tested, that they are adequately insured. There was a proposal as part of the consultation to potentially have charging pods that people can charge the vehicle, any battery operated vehicle in, but that wouldn't form part of the sheltered housing service charges. That's specifically looking at the current service charges that are charged to residents in sheltered housing schemes. Any charges that were implemented with the mobility scooter policy is completely separate to this review. Thank you.
Any other comments on this item? It is just for noting. Okay, thank you. We'll move on then. So item 12, tenant satisfaction measures survey. Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chairman. The end is in sight, people. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. Right, this report provides the committee with the results of the first wave of tenant satisfaction measures surveys. It's just for noting, and also make the point this is the first wave. The Council is required to undertake tenant satisfaction surveys on an annual basis to comply with the Transparency, Influence and Accountability Standard of the Social Housing Regulation Act, bracket 2023 close brackets. In previous years, the Council has completed the survey annually, but in the current year, the decision was made to conduct the survey in 2 waves to monitor whether the improvements that were being implemented were having a positive impact or not. So if they weren't working, we could go back to where we were before. The survey was undertaken by Acuity, and we received 275 completed survey responses and 16 incomplete responses. The results from the survey are shown in Table 1 on page 85 and provides a comparison of the results for 24-25 against the first half of this year. There has been a positive movement in all results except TP7, which is, I had it a minute ago. Yeah, a proportion of respondents who report they're satisfied, their landlord keeps them informed. That's remained the same. TP9, yeah, the complaints process, and TP12, antisocial behaviour, both of those scores have been reduced. Paragraph 2.9 provides further context for these reduced results. As this is the first year the Council has undertaken the survey in two waves, it's difficult to compare these results with the annual survey results, as Acuity have identified when undertaking surveys in a number of waves for other landlords, customer satisfaction can fluctuate throughout the year. I think we already recognised that customer satisfaction surveys in the winter months, people were always more disgruntled in the winter, during the dark nights, when we've had a week of rain, than they were in the middle of summer and just opted to, you know, the beach for the week or whatever. What a shock. So, yeah, those are the first lot of results, and we look forward to getting the full set in another 6 months' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just to comment on the results where the satisfaction's reduced, I have asked the officer to go back to Acuity and ask, with regards to antisocial behaviour, considering we have very, very low numbers of antisocial behaviour, well, reports to the council, for that score to reduce, I've asked them to go back and say, do you actually ask the people if they've experienced any antisocial behaviour issues? Because with speaking to other councils, they have said sometimes these results can be influenced just by what people have seen in the media. But also, coming back to Sarah's point, that other councils also experience this, that sometimes satisfaction with ASB reduces during the summer because there tends to be an increase in reports because people are outside more, whereas when you're then inside in the winter, you find that score improves because you're not having so much contact with people. And this is one of the reasons that we wanted to undertake the survey in two waves, not only just to see if we were getting positive responses with all of the improvements, but also I was talking to a neighbouring authority and they said their results tend to be better in the summer months on repairs and maintenance because there's less issues with, say, damp and mould, but not perform as well with ASB. But then when they get to the winter months one, they find the ASB score improves, but the repairs and maintenance one may reduce down. So I thought, well, it'd be really interesting to see whether we also get similar results and whether some of it is, because then obviously that helps you with shaping your service and what can you do more during those summer months with responding to ASB, but in the winter months with trying to respond to repairs and reports of repairs and maintenance. The one that is a bit of a surprise is the complaints handling, because the number of complaints now we get escalated to stage 2 has reduced down, so I would have expected that, and the number of volumes of complaints we're getting through has reduced down. But what we do know is the people that have responded to this have raised a complaint with the council, because that is a question that Acuity asked them. But yeah, I'm a little bit, because we respond, all of our complaints are now responded to on time. So whether it's just that people aren't satisfied with the response that we give, but we don't get many escalated to stage 2, so it might be that their complaint isn't upheld, but then actually we don't see an escalation to stage 2 as a consequence of that. So yeah, that is a little bit of a surprise because I would have expected that one to have continued to improve. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, colleagues? Yeah, Councillor Harrison.
Chair, again. Do we have any comparisons with our peers, other councils? Do we have comparisons on this with any others that we can, on percentage-wise and stuff like that? And then as the repair satisfaction's risen, but we're still getting flagged on the quality of work. Is there a reason on that, and how will we do the snagging inspections afterwards?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Acuity, when they do their annual report, do benchmark us with other authorities. So they put you into quartiles, but you can't do that with the first wait. You need to wait till you've got the results for the whole year. So we can certainly include that in the next report we present to the committee. We have implemented a KPI. I think it's of 10% post inspections. We now have all of those roles. We have been a little bit short-staffed in the repairs team. At one point, we'd only got one repair supervisor. We now have 3 repair supervisors, and we now have a permanent repairs manager. So there will be a focus on getting 10% post-inspections of all works that are undertaken in the repairs team. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there anything else before we move on? Okay, no, thank you very much for that. So we're going to, we're nearly there, yeah. Item 13, work programme. Obviously, everybody's had a chance to look at the work programme. Is there any comments on that or anything that anybody feels needs adding for? The next meeting is early-ish December, I believe, yeah. Councillor Lay.
Thank you. Just on the homelessness and rough sleeper update, excuse me, I had a discussion at the break with Sarah, and she said she would include the veterans numbers in that. So if we can make a note of that, please. And also, do we need to put on the sheltered housing report, which you just spoke about, Alison? Does that need to go on the December one, or is that going to be next year?
Yeah, it can come on the 4th. It's down as item 6 to say that the report will come on the 4th of December on the forward plan. I think it just needs moving to the bottom section of it. So on line 6, yeah. Yeah, so we'll bring a report to the committee on the 4th of December just to give you an update on that. Thank you.
That's great. Are you indicating, Councillor Morgan?
Don't look stupid. We've got the garage sites development, which we've just covered today, but I think it was mentioned that in the new year we should have some progress on that. Is it worth adding it? Sorry? Oh, in a year. Oh, I've misheard you. Wishful thinking. Thank you.
Okay, final opportunity for anything? No, so thank you very much. There is no any other business. And I close the meeting at 5 minutes. Thank you very much.